Welcome to an episode of Behind the Scenes, a weekly program unveiling the biggest political developments in Somali politics and the wider Horn of Africa region. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and co-producer here on Wararka Media alongside Suleiman Haji. On this week's program, see tensions rise again in Mogadishu between President Farmajo and his Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble as the President suspends the powers of his Prime Minister, and in response, Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has accused Villa Somalia of a military coup and accused the President of allegedly preventing him from entering his office using Somali National Army units. This is the major topic on the program this evening and a major development in Somali politics. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to Wararka Media. Also, do follow myself, Suleiman Haji, Yasin, and the wider Wararka Media team on our social media platforms. Let's get straight into it. As 2021 comes to an end and the 2022 new year is in the horizon, the Somalia election roller coaster only continues to turbulently shift away from its intended end goal, a successful and open election. Much like we've seen back in September, the squabbling with Ikram Tahlil case at its heart is now a ghost of the past, and the Prime Minister and the President have again clashed over not just the election, but the newly surfaced allegations of corruption against the Prime Minister by the now former Chief of the Somali Navy, General Abdul Hamid Dirir. It was just a week ago that the General appeared in a video that surfaced all over media outlets and social media, in which he accused some federal government ministers led by Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble of allegedly engaging in illegal land grabbing of property belonging to the Somali National Army in Mogadishu. In his statement, the General expressed disappointment in the actions of the Prime Minister, and he went on to say that he has been threatened with redundancy, but would not allow these allegations and acts of corruption, according to the General, to continue regardless of these threats. It is this statement that added fuel to an already lit fire, which has exacerbated the political situation in Somalia. Whether the Prime Minister engaged in such illegal acts or not is not known, and therefore the Prime Minister is currently not guilty of a crime, as there has not been an investigation which has found him guilty. However, reports are suggesting that the Prime Minister has set up an investigation into these allegations, and the President himself released a statement via Villa Somalia in which he has stated an investigation is set up, and as a result has suspended Prime Minister's action and powers. If such investigations were successful, this would be the first time in Somali history, and literally the first time, where a senior Somali official, let alone a Prime Minister, is being investigated for alleged corruption. Now, again, whether the Prime Minister is guilty or not can only be determined by an independent investigation, which will either exonerate or indict him for corruption. And this investigation team set up by the President will engage in activities to do the latter or the former. Now, while the Prime Minister has not directly responded to these accusations, the PM appointing State Minister General Bashir Gobe has responded to these accusations and has claimed that these accusations are non-existent. Instead, the minister categorized the actions of General Dirir as a witch hunt against the Prime Minister. Now, Minister Gobe continued that the actions of the General broke the ethics conduct of a military personnel to talk to the media and accuse heads of government involving themselves in politics. Now, while Gobe had stated he admired the work of President Farmajo to provide homes for senior military and former military officials in the area, he claimed that the land in question, based on the circulating footage, is a small chunk of land on the coast. Instead, he conveyed that the official land of the Somali National Army ends at his home in Mogadishu and does not go beyond, and therefore the land in question is not even military. Gobe continued that this was a setup, as he put it, against positive relations between the Prime Minister and his President. Interestingly, General Gobe denied that ministers within the federal government were attempting to purchase land to build property as claimed by General Dirir. Instead, he only disputed whether the land was land of the Somali National Army and didn't actually dispute the accusations in itself. Now, Minister Gobe is correct in the sense that it is against the ethics of a senior military commander to speak to the press in such a manner in any regard, and indeed it is only right only a few days later President Farmajo will suspend the General of the Somali National Navy on such grounds. However, what is clear is that the General was a whistleblower and knew that this would be an outcome, and even claimed in his video and his statement that he did not care about his role but about his own country. Now, what is a groundbreaking move the first groundbreaking move, came from Somalia, in which the president suspended the powers of the prime minister pending investigations regarding allegations of corruptions. Now, the presidency cited the following legal texts as the underlying powers which allow the presidency to remove the prime minister and suspend his powers. Article 87 of the Somali Provisional Constitution, which confers by the president the duty to promote basic principles of the constitution. A presidential decree regarding the protection of public lands in accordance with Article 43 of the Provisional Constitution, which was issued on the 18th of January 2018, and a law banning the misuse and misappropriation of public property during elections, which came into effect on the 27th of October 2021. And the combination of all these different legal texts is the reason that Villa Somalia argues that it's suspending the Prime Minister's powers. And Villa Somalia further elucidated that the Prime Minister engaged in what it called actions which were contrary to the above laws and constitutional duties bestowed upon the First Minister, and accused the Prime Minister of engaging in corruption, including, and I quote, encroachment of public land owned by Somali National Army. Number 2, putting political pressure on the former Minister of Defense, Hussein Haji, to tamper with investigations into the alleged encroachment on SNA property stated by the Chief of the Navy, General Abdul Hamid did it. Now, in this point, I think for further clarity for the listener, is that Hussein Haji, now former defense minister, was swapped with the Minister of Justice. While there was no actual explanation for this did happen only a few days ago, and the Villa Somalia is accusing the Prime Minister and his team of political pressure. In effect, implied that Hussein Haji essentially refused to do the bidding of the Prime Minister. And finally, as I've just explained, the reshuffling of the cabinet by the Prime Minister before the completion of the ongoing investigation by the Somali National Army over abuse of public lands owned by the SNA, in which he swapped the Justice and Defense Ministers. And now that is what Villa Somalia has said. Conversely, the Prime Minister has branded such a move as outrageous, as in the words his team has put it. Roble actually went on to elucidate that the president, in a statement on televised on TV, on Facebook and Somali National TV, Roble went on to elucidate that the president, and I quote, doesn't have the constitutional powers to do or make any changes to the federal government or its workings, and instead, the Prime Minister said the president should step aside like other candidates. Additionally, the Prime Minister has ordered all security officials, including the National Army, to only take orders from himself and not from the president. This comes at a time in which the president has suspended powers of the Prime Minister, as there is an impending investigation against the Prime Minister on allegations of corruption. Now, the speech made by the Prime Minister indicates that he has swiftly not only rejected his president's authority, but has also for the first time referred to him as the former president and a candidate. Now, one major issue that we can see from the statement by the Prime Minister, quite short statement, was that the Prime Minister is not the Commander-in-Chief, and as it's clearly stipulated in the Somali Provisional Constitution, the president, and only the person who's holding the office of the president, a person which has an electoral mandate, is the only commander of the National Army. And it seems as though that the Prime Minister might be going through what we would call a power trip. And secondly, what is interesting for many observers is that the Prime Minister did not address allegations of corruption in any way. Roble only seems to dispute the suspension of his power. He does not actually reject the accusations made against him or the investigation set up by Villa Somalia. So his guilt or innocence will most definitely determine Roble's place in history, because if Roble is proven guilty of such crimes, regardless of whether Roble taints these investigations as rigged or not, this will definitely hinder and really put a black paint over his mark in the history of Somali politics. Now, another area of dispute that remains between the two leaders is the election, which continues to be sluggish, with the deadline of 2021 seeming like a distant fairy tale. The president released a statement accusing the Prime Minister of failing to undertake, and I quote, his mandate to lead the country through elections as per 7th September agreement, and subsequent procedures issued on October 1st, 2020. Villa Somalia highlighted the delayed and slow pace of the PM in conducting the elections as tasked by the president following his presidential decree issued on the 1st of May 2021 in an address to the houses of the people. Now, Villa Somalia also highlighted what it's called deviation from the electoral regulations and processes, as well as the independence of electoral commissions being tampered with. Now, as you all know, the electoral commissions have had a few changes. 7 members of the dispute committee have been removed by the Prime Minister, and this came on the backdrop of the Council of Presidential Candidates really pushing the Prime Minister to kind of remove certain members which they deem to be supporting of the president. And obviously these accusations haven't been proven, but the Prime Minister, I think, in a way kind of removed it on pressure of them. And also we see some kind of an internal dispute in the Federal Election Committee, where we see Mohamed Irro, a person who has previously been categorized as a supporter of Farmajo by the opposition, being again embattled in his seat. Now, the president called for a scrap of the National Consultative Council and called the Prime Minister, and called for a new meeting of not just the NCC, but also intellects, political candidates such as the opposition and civil society to find a new way and a leader to lead the election implementation, saying that the Prime Minister has failed to do so. This could possibly mean a new Prime Minister or just a new official to head the election implementation, which everyone agrees upon. Now, indeed, the Council of Presidential Candidates, or the CPC, has been the most vocal, as I've mentioned, about the election flaws, particularly the power held by federal member states in influencing elections. And this is absolutely correct. Now, federal member states have used sufficient and outrageously large amounts of power to a point where they're able to hold the election to hostage or ransom until they get what they want. CPC members have pointed out seats in which, so for example, acting head of Nissa Yassin Ferre, or events that unfolded in Southwest, including former Speaker of the House Jawari, as evidence of election rigging, of course, in their argument in favor of Farmajo. However, many have accused the CPC of cherry picking, as there has been open and rife election rigging in Kismayo, for example, earlier today, in which 6 members were chosen and all close allies of President Mohamed Islam. And during the upper house election, in which we've seen in Puntland, in Jubaland, in parts of Hirshabelle and all other places where election rigging has taken place, but they've remained silent and even congratulated the successful candidates that they deem are not Farmajo supporters. So to cherry pick and choose particular candidates in one avenue and not the other avenue it kind of showcases the bias being portrayed by the CPC and them failing to really fulfill their role as opposition and hold the government to account in a right way and not just a one-sided way. Nevertheless, it would be in their interest to have such a meeting outlined by the president, as the Prime Minister has refused on multiple occasions to include the group within election talks. However, it seems as though political hatred for the president is, as their biggest political competitor, outweighs everything to the Council of Presidential Candidates. Regional leaders, as usual, have capitalized on the scuffling in Mogadishu by picking sides and ensuring that the impasse remains to buy time. We see previously the reluctant Puntland and Jubaland, who were, by the way, reluctant to take part in any NCC meeting, now immediately jumping to support the Prime Minister's call for a meeting. Whereas we've seen Comfortable, which was also reluctant to take part in its NCC meeting, now supporting the President for his NCC meeting. The reality is that the election is heading into 2022. And President Farmajo, for example, has stepped aside since May 1st, 2021 for the regional leaders and the Prime Minister to head and complete the elections by 2021. The NCC is made up of the heads of the federal government and federal member states, agreed for a roadmap for presidential elections in May for the presidential election to take place by October, which has obviously failed. Now in October, a new agreement was reached for the Houses of Parliament to be completed by 2021 for the presidential elections to begin by January 2022. And again, this has failed. The election is going slower than ever before, and time is taking for Somalia to escape from the stagnant and indeed slow and hindered position within a constitutional loophole. If the CPC are genuine, if the opposition is genuine for elections, then they should be questioning the Prime Minister. They should be questioning why he's taking so long to hold these elections. They should be questioning why he's taking foreign trips to Djibouti or Qatar or Kenya instead of dealing with the election that's going on right now. Instead of waiting almost 6-7 months and having barely completed his first task. It's absurd. So who's to blame for these delays? Well, the Prime Minister is accountable first and foremost because he is the person in charge of the implementation, and he should be asked and he should explain why he has failed to fulfill 2 agreements, not just the May agreement, which was for October 8th for the presidential election, but the October agreement, which has failed to even finish the lower house elections by 2021. Secondly, regional leaders have hijacked this election and continue to delay to benefit themselves. For example, Hirshabelle, Jubaland and Puntland won 1 city elections, not 2, and therefore the continued delay would eventually see elections being rushed and reduced to 1 city, and we can already see that unfolding slowly. Thirdly, the international community, which continues to pick sides, pass judgment, and mingle in Somali politics in a level which they shouldn't be. This unfortunately influences minds and political analysts, which are the first to point to comments from the UK ambassador or the US officials about the Somali election when they are foreign governments with their own interests at heart and not the Somali people. And fourthly, the absence of a Supreme Court. All governments of Somalia thus far have failed to establish a Supreme Court that oversees the legal issues facing Somalia. Due to the absence of a legal order or legal hierarchy, so to speak, disputes end in word versus word, which ultimately leads to hands, guns, bloodshed, and eventual displacement. And it's for the Supreme Court to implement the Constitution, and this is imperative to prevent any kind of continued or future legal political battles, which the Constitution would easily settle. And finally, the Constitution itself, which has flaws and is a constitution which was designed in a way where there would be continued battlements between the president and the prime minister. Behind the scenes has made a program on the Constitution, and Alfredo Media has made a program on Mahahi Saleh, and you can watch these programs on the Alfredo Media YouTube channel to get more insight into the Constitution and why it's flawed in itself. In closing remarks, the entire individuals and groups discussed in this program claim to be stakeholders and demand access to this election. They are wrong. You and I, the Somali people, are the stakeholders of this democracy and the election. The continued denying of this basic right for the Somali individual to vote for their leader, which has been going on since 1969, will go down in history as one of the greatest injustices of Somali times.